Welcome to the Planning for Life podcast with certified financial planner professional Russell Jacobs and financial life advisor Carl Coolidge. Carl and Russell will share creative strategies and ideas for overcoming challenges in your personal and financial life. Inevitably, life happens, and we will empower you to reach your destination. Thanks for joining us. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to another podcast with Jacobs, Coolidge and Company. Today I am interviewing Carl Coolidge, and what we're going to talk about is diving a little bit more deeply into what makes JCC truly unique and different. Now, there are a lot of different things that financial services companies do, but what our experience has been is very few of them do as many as JCC. So, Carl, let's just kind of start from the beginning, which would be, Finance 101, something that you have helped with in the past and do help your clients with, which is an essential financial planning tool, is budgeting. Talk to us about what sort of conversations you have with clients surrounding budgets and how difficult is it for them to adhere to a budget if they haven't had one in the past?
Well, I think what we really try to do is not as much of a budget, but more focus on expenses, meaning what are they spending on a monthly and annual basis. And I will tell you, without a doubt, it is the hardest or the most difficult thing for us to get from clients. They either don't want to know, have no interest in really knowing how much they spend. They want to put their head in the sand about it, or a lot of times between spouses, they just don't want to have that very frank conversation. So I think it's really the key to determining any good financial situation is knowing what their expenses are. And what we really try to do is work with them to say, we're not telling you where you can or cannot spend money or where you should or should not spend money. We're just trying to determine how much you're spending and where it's going. And then if you want certain things to occur, you may have to make adjustments to your expenses or your budget. And as I said, it's very challenging to get them to figure that out. And so if we tell everyone, if you can be probably plus or minus 10%, you're doing very, very well.
Okay.
And I say that because unless you're spending every dollar on credit card or debit card or writing a check for it, there's no way for you to determine every single dollar that you spend in a given month or a given year.
Do you use any tools, and we don't have to talk about a product specific here, but there are vehicles or apps or computer programs that can help with that. Do you ever kind of nudge people in that direction to help gain that information?
Certainly tell them that there's apps out there that they can use, and everybody knows the different names, and you can, of course, search them up and find whatever you'd want. We usually keep it old school, if you will, and just use a Excel spreadsheet that we send to them. And really our goal is to help them think about categories they may forget about. So a lot of people have annual expenses that they may or may not remember. And so this helps trigger that to say, oh, yes, I do have that expense, or we do have this cost. So we usually like to start with that. And then to me, I think you could move into some more technology-based budgeting or expense systems once you have that baseline in place.
Got it. It was very eye-opening to me when my family did that. We had used an online program, and my advisor sat down with us and said, were you aware? And that really goes to what you're saying, Carl. A lot of it's just awareness. It's not a judgment. It's, did you know?
Right. And
there were a couple of things that we were spending more money on than we had actually expected. Most of it was our children, and then I tried to figure out how I could save money on my children, and that just didn't work as well.
Possible, Matt, not possible.
So after budgeting, and getting a good idea of where the debits and credits are, we really try to focus on debt and savings. Now, you have a different philosophy on debt and savings, or at least the philosophy that I've heard you talk about in the past is a refreshing philosophy that I think it'd be really good for our listeners to hear. So let's talk about how you, as a seasoned financial services professional, have the discussion with your clients about debt and savings.
Well, I think you have to find the balance. Most clients or individuals out there are really focused on reducing debt. I think we've been taught not to have debt. I think it's ingrained in a lot of people that they want to be debt free, which again, on the surface sounds very, very good. And it does give you some extent of freedom when you can be debt free. However, I think there is such a thing as good debt. And depending on a lot of factors, your credit, interest rates, length of terms, what money you have invested, what your current financial situation is, obviously a lot of different moving parts. But I think sometimes debt can be a very good instrument to have in place that complements your savings, because you may have different needs depending on where you are in your life. And so sometimes debt is not a bad thing as long as it's used properly and really fits into your given financial situation.
Got it. Okay. So it isn't just a black and white, and that's really why I wanted to have you talk about that. It's not a right or wrong or on or off or black and white. Debt can be good. Debt can also be crippling, right? And so, yeah, okay, I like that. Now, so let's say we get a good analysis of your budgeting, and we get some good analysis on your debt and savings. College is a big thing, right? So successful people generally want their children to go to some school. How do you have that conversation actually, I should probably begin by saying, when do you have that conversation, and how do you ask the right questions to get a greater understanding of how much participation your clients might want to have in helping their kids pay for college?
Again, I think it's different for every individual, and I maybe take a little different approach to this than others. Is naturally most of the clients we work with want to be able to pay for their children's college, or at least a portion of it. My focus is really saying, okay, are you doing the things financially that you need to do to take care of yourself first? Because one line I use a lot is to say, you can borrow for college, you can't borrow for retirement. And so you have to, again, find the balance to say, are you doing the things? Do you have the financial tools in place that you should for your situation personally? And then you can move into addressing college needs. And ideally, we like to do that through our financial planning process, because with the database we have, we can get very specific on college costs with those individuals. So if they want to go in-state, out-of-state, public, private, we can get very specific with them and really narrow down what they're trying to accomplish. And once you're able to identify what a number looks like or where you think they may want to go to school, then you can start having discussions about, are they going to get some sort of scholarship? Is there sort of some kind of state tuition benefit that they can receive? And then we're sort of backing into that savings number that they need to have in order to accomplish how much of that school they want to pay for. But again, after they've dealt with the things they need to deal with personally, because if you don't have the other things in good order, then the college is not going to matter at that point.
Do you have that same conversation with grandparents and seeing if they want to, maybe they've had a surplus, they haven't spent as much, or they did better than they thought they were going to do in retirement? Do you have that conversation with retirees also?
We do. I think it's a different conversation because in most instances, they're retired already. They either have established their retirement income or how their assets are spread out or dispersed. And so they usually have a number or a dollar amount in their mind that they want to put towards that grandchild. So it's a little different conversation of not how much they have to put, but how much they think they want to put.
Okay, cool. Now, preparing for retirement, because you are so financial planning focused, you can begin planning for retirement pretty much at any time, right? I mean, it's important the earlier you get to it, the better. Let's talk about that conversation. Let's talk about what sort of questions are you asking people so that you can glean the right information to help them prepare for a successful retirement?
It really starts with their goals. Again, rich can mean different things to different people. It's not just necessarily a monetary conversation. It can be that rich to them is being able to spend more time with their grandchildren. It can be having, a second or third home. It can be a lot of different variations of that. So we really start with understanding what their goals are. So what do they want to accomplish long term? And again, it depends on the age of our client and the discussion we're having at that point. But once we're able to determine what they want, then we can give them ideas on typically the most effective way to save for those goals. And the biggest thing that I tell everyone is time is something you can't get back. So the earlier you can start, the earlier you can begin, even if it's small dollars in your mind at that point, that's something that you can never get back. So if you can start in your 20s or even your 30s versus starting in your late 40s or 50s, the effect is dramatic because we've all heard of compound interest. And that's really the biggest difference, in my opinion, of most people being prepared for retirement or not, is that longevity or that grind of saving ongoing, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what's going on in the markets. It's just that consistent savings is what usually works well for people.
Got it. Building a sustainable retirement income, just to kind of wrap things up for today, is something that I think a lot of people really hope for. Let's talk about that conversation. Goal focused, I understand, but after, how often do you have to have a conversation with somebody by saying, your goals just flat out aren't going to happen, or, which would be the most ideal situation, or you guys aren't thinking big enough? Walk us through how that works with you.
Well, I think that goes back to our first discussion point, which is expense-based. Because you've heard the old adage, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. It's really a similar conversation to us in retirement, meaning you'll see a lot of tools and calculators and things online that say you need X% of your current income to make it in retirement. Well, again, that's subjective because it depends on your situation and what your goals are. So what we focus on is, okay, here are your expenses, here's what it's going to cost. Then we, through our planning process, we can inflate those numbers and come to what that looks like at retirement. And then we're getting into specifics at that point of, yes, you want to retire with X dollars, but unfortunately, unless you do things today, you're not going to be able to get there. And so we like to drive it off of expenses because that way people can really see how it impacts their situation instead of just doing a calculator that shows them a big savings number, which, to your point, may or may not be realistic.
When you're looking at conversations with your financial services professional, so everybody who's listening to the podcast today, if your advisor isn't having these conversations, if your advisor isn't diving in deep and asking you those questions, and if your advisor is just doing quick cash flow projections and they're not doing a complete and comprehensive financial plan, you're really missing out in this host's opinion. A lot of people, Carl, I've heard say, plan more for a 2-week vacation to Europe than they do for their overall retirement. And when you look at the detail of a plan that you can do with JCC, that level of detail provides a level of security and peace of mind that a real quick cash flow projection can't do. So let's talk about a success story of somebody who has been through your process. We'll just go real high level here. This isn't an exact story. You can just give us some kind of examples here. What sort of feedback do you get 5 years after retirement, 10 years after somebody's retired who've gone through your planning process?
Well, I think the feedback we get is, it's key on the assumptions you make because, again, that varies per person. And what we always try to err on is the side of being more conservative because, as we say, nobody's typically going to get upset if they have more money than you originally planned for. I think what makes us different is we give very realistic calculations because we do spend so much time trying to understand your situation, understand those goals, understand your cash flow. And so we really can, when we're having this conversation, as you say, 5 years into retirement, we're going to go back and we're able to see with our clients that the numbers we looked at were very, very accurate. Of course, they're never perfect because life isn't perfect, but they adjust over time. And that's why we really believe in having our annual review process where we can sit down and really talk to our clients about what's changed, what's different, what needs to be adjusted. Some of them, there's not very much that needs to be tweaked, but for others, they've had their spouse get ill. They've had more grandchildren. They want to move to a different community. So there's things that can change And that's why we want to be very involved in that process and always have the conversation of let's tweak it, let's change it, let's adjust it where we need to make sure we're still getting a very accurate depiction of your situation.
From an ideal client standpoint, let's just wrap up with that. So if you were going to have like the greatest potential client give you a call today after hearing this podcast, what would that client look like?
We get asked that quite a bit. What's our ideal client? What I would say is we work best with time-challenged individuals, because typically those that are time-challenged are successful in whatever field they are in, and that are really open to new ideas. If you can come in and not have preconceived notions or negative outlook on certain investment vehicles or certain products that are in the market, then that's where we work best, where we're able to really understand you, understand your situation, and give you recommendations based on what we see given your situation. And so if you don't have those preconceived notions and you have the ability to really understand and listen to what we're saying, that's where we find the most success. And those are the clients we really enjoy because we can find ways that really help them be successful.
Fantastic. There is a lot of misinformation out there, everybody, and this is one of the reasons why you're listening to this podcast, is to find out really what is going on and what different things that you can do to help yourself live the retirement of your dreams. So, Carl, thank you very much for your thought leadership today.
Thank you, Matt.
And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you take one moment and click the subscribe now button below. That way, every time Russell or Carl comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. You'll stay in the loop and also make it easier for you to share all of this information with your friends and family. Take control of the information that you are absorbing and that your family and friends are absorbing. Listening to a seasoned and wonderful financial services professional really can make a huge difference in not only where you're going in life, but where you are right now. So for everybody at JCC, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Russell C. Jacobs III, Carl B. Coolidge, James Jacobs, and William Schwartz are registered representatives of and offer securities, investment advisory, and financial planning services through MML Investor Services, LLC, member SIPC, Supervisory Office, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, LLC is not a subsidiary or affiliate of MML Investor Services, LLC, or its affiliated companies.